Hey guys, it's Roger. Decided to get off the couch and show you guys a quick little tutorial on how I do the post-processing for some of the portraits that I do. More on the glamour side of the house, but sometimes I use it for standard portraits as well too, depending on the subject and depending on what the use case is. I am standing up here, so just to motivate me to move as quick as possible. This will not take more than 5 to 10 minutes. Once you're proficient in this type of processing, the photo itself shouldn't take more than a half hour to do at tops. Could take a little bit longer depending on how much level of detail there is and how much you need to get granular with your brushes. But for the most part, you can get a pretty quick and dirty portrait done in 15 to 20 minutes. So what you want to do is you want to first start off in your post-processing software of choice. Mine's Lightroom. You can use Aperture as well. But you want to take the image and you want to adjust it in the raw format before you move it over to Photoshop. And it's easier to do that here too. So fix the white balance, the blue and the yellow and the green and magenta. Fix the exposure. Now these exposure things are pretty standard in each of the programs that you're going to use, so I'll just discuss them a little bit. Exposure is the overall exposure of the photo. You have a little bit more exposure wiggle room when using raw. So this gives you a good slider to darken it up, to brighten it up. In this photo, this is about right. So I'm just going to leave it roughly where it was before. Recovery is the detail in the white areas of the photo. So if you have a blown photo, you need to bring out a little bit more detail in the whites. You could boost this recovery. For this, I kind of like the blown look, so I'm going to keep it at where it is, around 23, just to give a little bit more detail back. Fill light gives you control over the brightness of the dark areas. So if your subject is silhouetted out a bit and you need a little bit more detail on there, you would increase the fill light. Here I just want a little bit more fill light, not a whole lot. I just want to brighten up the hair and brighten up the eyes a little bit from the back. And the blacks are the darkness of the dark areas. So if you want to add a little bit more contrast, you can add more blacks. Be careful when you go too far with the blacks slider. You will lose some imaging. So the purple areas you see at the bottom, I'll make this a little more drastic so you can see that. The purple areas here show you areas of the photo that have no information. They're pure black. You want to limit that as much as possible. So I get the slider to roughly where it is about right now, maybe a little bit more. I still have a little bit more information there, just to give enough contrast. But from here, you can go into the rest of the features of whatever software you decide. If you want to adjust the curves, if you want to adjust the color channels, noise reduction, sharpness, you can do a lot of that from here, and you'll be set. But let's take this into Photoshop, where I can show you some of the portrait techniques that I've been using. Now, I'm not professionally trained, so some of these techniques are probably not efficient, or probably wrong in some cases. If you have been professionally trained, or if you know of a better technique to use, please let me know. I'm always trying to get better and to learn more. But these are just the ones that I've these are the ones that I've picked up with in my self-taught days. So the first thing I always do is I always going to keep the original in the background layer. I want to duplicate a layer, call it main, and this is the one I'm going to work off of. Mostly because I want to have a before and after, just to see how far I've strayed from the original. Typically, when you're doing post-processing, you're going to overdo what you ever need to do. Having that original back there kind of brings you back to reality. I want to duplicate it, and now what I want to do is get rid of the more obvious blemishes so they don't carry forth through the workflow. I want to go in and take out any kind of acne, scarring, anything that is quite obvious that you need to get rid of. When you can, work in actual pixels so your computer is not making up information. Actual pictures, or if you want to go out to the full screen to see the whole thing, that's fine too. But I try to work in actual pixels as much as possible. With the spot healing tool, I'm going to get rid of the blemishes that you see here. It really is the best way of quickly getting rid of wrinkles, quickly rid of blemishes, spots, anything that you may want to get rid of, high marks. It's really a good tool, especially now that it has content aware option to use for this type of procedure. So that gets rid of most of the blemishes. She's lucky she doesn't have a whole lot. If it was me, I'd still be working on that. From there, you want to go ahead and focus some attention on the eyes. Still with the spot healing brush, just a little bit smaller of a brush. I want to start removing some of these veins in the eyes, maybe the contact lens line. Not all of them. I wouldn't go all the way with all of them because you still want it to have some kind of detail in there. Still have some kind of naturalness to the eyes. You don't want it to look like you erased the corneas. So once I've done that, you can go ahead and then go to the dodge tool. What the dodge tool is, it's going to lighten up certain segments of the photo. You have your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights, depending on what you want to increase the exposure of. In this case, I want to stay the midtones. I want to make sure the exposure is set pretty low. 15% is pretty good. And the brush size is about where I need it. And just brush over the corneas a little bit. Not too much. People tend to overdo this step quite a bit, and it makes it look like the eyes are actually cut out, but just enough. And then again, you have that background image so you can see the before and the after as you go along. Once you're satisfied with the outcome, you're good. And then from here, if you're not going to do a little bit more advanced sharpening down the road, I would probably use a sharpen tool with a pretty low strength and sharpen the pupils and the irises a bit. This is especially helpful for bringing out those catch lights. You can see my umbrellas here on both of her eyes. And it just brings out more detail, and you really want to make sure that the sharpest point of a portrait is the eye. So adding a little bit of sharpness here doesn't hurt. Okay, so we are done with the blemishes. If you wanted to whiten the teeth are pretty white here, so I probably wouldn't touch them. Actually, I always touch them. So just add a little bit of whiteness to them. That's it. So you have a before and after. It just adds a little bit more contrast having the white eyes. It makes it look a little bit more appealing. From here, this is where we get into the more complicated area. This is where we're going to start doing the skin smoothing. From your main, you want to duplicate the layer. You actually want to duplicate it twice. The first layer you can call softening. The second layer, call it high pass, and I'll show you why we call that high pass in a second. Turn off the top layer, and let's start working with the softening layer first. From here, you want to go into your filters up top, and under blur, different people like different blurring techniques. Just to keep it simple, I'm going to go with the Gaussian blur. It's pretty effective for what we needed to do. The pixels around 6.6 or 6, 7, 8, that area, depending on the resolution of your photo, depending on the pixel density. Just do it so where it looks a little bit soft. It looks a little Vaseline over the lens soft type thing. And you want to apply that to the layer. So you can immediately tell, there's the before, there's the after, it's soft. But you don't want to apply softening to the eyes. You don't want to apply softening to the nails or the clothing or the hair. So we want to create a layer mask. That's that box right here with the box in a circle. And from this layer mask, make sure you select it right here, right next to the soft word. You can do it one of two ways. You can paint and then erase, or erase and then paint. I found filling it with black and then erasing it provides me with the best results. Don't really know why. That's just what I do. And from there, you want to choose the eraser. See, now it's all black, so now it's pretty much masking this whole layer off so you don't see any of the softening. You want to paint the softening in now. So you got your paintbrush, you've selected your layer mask. Make sure the paintbrush is a reasonable size for this photo, 300 pixels to start off with. And the softness, put a little feathering and make the opacity 100%, the flows 100%. And from there, you just start painting the skin. Let's zoom in to actual pixels so we can see what we're doing here. And again, this is quick and dirty. I would obviously go in there with a finer brush some places. I would mask off some of the hair maybe. But I just want to go in here and show you guys what we're basically doing here. A little smaller brush. Now, the thing to note is you want to avoid the hard edges when you're doing this. So the nostril areas, you don't want to go over the nostril itself. You just want to paint the flat areas of the skin. See there, I just went over the cheek. That's going to come out wrong. That's going to come out poorly. So I want to make sure I stay within the hard edges. Paint within the lines like they taught you in grade school. Make sure that everything that you're capturing everything. If you miss something, it's going to look kind of weird. I painted over the eyelashes here. I wouldn't do that if I was not doing this for demonstration purposes. Hit the eyebrow there. And then this could be undone too just by changing it, the brush to the white, just reversing it to get rid of it. So let's get the rest of the skin. I'm just going to keep doing this for a second while I'm talking. So you just want to make sure it's smooth. Now, it does not look natural right now. It shouldn't look natural right now if you're doing this process. All you're trying to do is get the consistency in the skin color in the background. So again, avoid the chin line itself. Just go over or near it, but not over it. The feathering is going to help out with that as well too. Just make sure you get as much as possible here. I think I got most of it. I would also do the neck and the arms, maybe with less effect than the arms, depending. But basically, you get the idea. You're painting the skin until it's smooth. Now, this doesn't look natural. This looks like garbage, actually. It's just a blurred mess. It looks like something is out of focus. Uh, the key to this now is the first thing you want to do is look at the opacity of this layer and change it to something a little bit more reasonable. Still soft. Um, you may not be able to see the pores, but you're starting to see a little bit of detail for the minor wrinkles. But then when we bring in the high pass filter, this is where it's really going to start changing the way the skin softening looks. So under high pass, once you've selected the layer, you go under filters, under other, there's going to be a filter called high pass. Now high pass is going to create an outline of the contrasty areas. So it's going to give you detail in the pores, it's going to give you detail in the rims of the nose and so forth. Around 4 pixels is good here, 4.5 pixels, 5 even, let's go 5. And you're going to see you're going to have this gray area. Oops, that hand move. You're going to have these gray areas where the high contrast areas are. It's going to almost give you like an embossed image. This in itself is utter crap. You don't want to use this as a portrait. But if you go into the layer type and change it to either soft light or hard light, depending on how much detail you want back, I prefer soft light, especially when doing a female. Soft light, it's going to give you those pores back. So you see the pores. There's still the softening there, but you're going to see a lot more of the pores in there. And you can mess with this opacity too if you want to tone down the effect of the high pass filtering. And this is a way of sharpening too. Now, what you don't want to do is sharpen everything else as well. The hair and stuff like that. If you want to do that separately. A quick little trick that I found to copy layer masks is actually go to the layer with the mask that you've already created, and if you duplicate it, which is not showing up here for some reason, here we go. You duplicate it, then you could slide that layer mask to the high pass filter, and then delete that layer that you just duplicated. I'm sure there's an easier way of doing that. This is the easiest way I found. I figured this out on my own. I'm sure there's a duplicate layer mask somewhere. I just don't know what it is. But this is the same effect. So now what you're looking at is a much softer skin. Well, let me show you. The next step here, let me show you for the before and after. The next step after you soften the skin is to duplicate the 3 layers that you were just working on. And then merging those layers. So now you have a new master that you're working with. You could turn these off. Now you have a new master, and now you can see the before. You can see the before and the after. The before and the after. Still detail in the after. It's just a little bit softer. Eyes are whiter. It just looks a little bit more pleasing. So you have the fit screen. Let me show you the before and the after. Before and after. The more you do this, the faker it looks like from the image when you actually create it. But trust me, after you get used to looking at the image, it actually looks fairly natural. From here, I usually like brightening up some colors in certain areas. Maybe if I want the lips a little bit brighter, if I wanted to put cheeks. In one of the pictures I did with this, her right cheek seemed a little bit more flush than her left cheek. So I wanted to make sure that I even those out. And to do that, I would create a new layer. If I can move. This one I'll call it makeup. If that's two words or two, whatever. Let's move into the full screen here, or actual pixels again. And say I want to add color to her lips, or I want to add blue eyeliner. Whatever I want to do, this is what I would do in this type of layer. So I would take the paintbrush. Now I would start off with a fairly obnoxious color so I can see what I'm doing. Fairly good brush size. Let's go ahead and paint the lips. You could feather the brush a little bit to help with the hard edges. You don't really want this to have hard edges. You're just trying to apply color and not necessarily take over the color. A smaller brush to do the top lip. Now it looks a little clownish right now. I know. Bear with me a second. I'll show you where we're going with this. And I'll probably go back and erase some of the bad spots that I clearly missed. I don't want red teeth. Okay. So soften that. This is just rough. You may want to get more detailed or not. But once you have done that, you can go into the layer and the layer type. And again, we're going to choose soft light. That's immediately going to bring out the detail below it. And now it's just going to colorize that area. From here, you could also go back and change some of the coloring. Some of the paintbrushes to make sure you got everything you needed to get. Okay. So go into the opacity, tone it down to something a little bit more realistic and not so obnoxious. You can also go into the image adjustments, hue and saturation. And if you wanted a different color, you would choose colorize on this box. And from here, you could choose different colors. Now, it's important to note this is providing a soft light over what was already there. So a blue on top of a red is going to create a purple. If you wanted to really change the colors, you could bump up the saturation. You could bump up the saturation and change the colors. Change the fill back on the opacity back on the layer mask. But I want something a little bit more realistic, so let's just keep it at a red and a midland saturation point. So go back to opacity, make sure everything's fine. There, makeup's done. If I wanted to do that with the eyes, I could do that with the eyes as well too. Blush, a number of different things that you can do. Okay. From here, I would project this and merge those. And now, if I wanted to darken the hair, I use a lot of strobes. So strobes tend to make hair shiny because hair is very reflective. If I wanted to go into the burn tool, in the shadows, fairly low exposure. If I wanted to add a little bit more contrast to the hair, I would probably do that at this point. Just to get a little bit more detail, a little bit more contrast. Just again, being very rough with this, but you get the idea. So the hair's a little bit darker. I would probably change that opacity down a little bit. Actually, no, I can't because I forgot to duplicate the layer. I go into edit, and I can't fade either. There. So there we go. So from there, I would duplicate again. I would merge again, and we have the final. Don't think I missed anything. If I did, I'll try to add it to the form here. But basically, we have the before and we have the after. A little bit more contrast, a little bit more vivid colors. The skin is a little bit better looking, and that's what we have. Now, while I have you here, I'll go ahead and show you how to make a before and after. I'll go into the canvas size. In this case, I want actually I should have it like this. So the after is on the right instead of the left. Double the width, so that should be 23.2, no, 43.2. Zoom back out. I'm going to take the background and duplicate it. And Control T to move it. And that's that's it. So now I'm going to save this as a JPEG and share it out. But hope you guys found this informative. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you have better ways of doing this. Thanks.